Namaskar, aspirants, and welcome. Today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating paradox, one that has huge implications for India's future, and, something you'll definitely see come up in your GS papers 2 and 3. It's all about how we seem to embrace technology that changes our very genes, but then resist it so strongly when it comes to the food on our plates.
So, this is the core question we need to be thinking about, especially as future policymakers. Why is it that we celebrate gene therapy as this incredible medical miracle, something that can cure terrible diseases, but at the same time, we look at genetically modified crops with so much suspicion and fear? To really understand this, we've got to break down both sides of this argument.
And to deconstruct that paradox, let's begin with a technology we seem to welcome with open arms: gene therapy. Its acceptance isn't just a coincidence. It really comes down to a few very specific, and I'd say very personal reasons.
Now, the key to public trust really lies in this distinction right here. The gene therapies that we currently use, they target somatic cells. And this is absolutely critical. What it means is that any genetic changes are limited only to the patient. They won't be passed down to their children. That single boundary makes the whole technology feel a lot less intimidating, doesn't it?
And this slide? Well, it illustrates the why perfectly. We're talking about offering a potential cure for these devastating, often life-limiting diseases you see listed. When you can see such a direct, personal benefit, the chance to actually save a life, the public's whole calculation of risk versus reward completely changes.
Okay, so let's pivot now to the other side of this whole paradox. This is a topic that is, frankly, a cornerstone of your GS3 syllabus, the really fierce debate around genetically modified or GM crops. You see, crops like the mustard in this picture, along with things like cotton and maize, they've been safely grown and eaten around the world for decades now. And yet, despite that long track record, the opposition, especially here in India and in Europe, it's still incredibly strong. So what's really driving it?
Well, this opposition isn't about just one thing. It's actually a mix of different concerns. There are fears about potential environmental damage, about losing biodiversity, and then there are these deeper socioeconomic worries about a few giant corporations controlling our entire food supply through their seed patents.
And this brings us to a very, very important point for your GS paper 2. This whole issue has created a divided world. You have the Americas, the US, Canada, on one side, who are major cultivators and exporters. And then you have Europe and India, which for the most part don't allow GM crops to be grown. This difference in regulatory policy has massive implications for global food trade and agriculture.
Okay, so we've seen the two sides of the story. Now let's get to the most important part of the analysis. Why? Why on earth do we perceive these two applications of the exact same science so differently? It's time to decode this public perception.
This table really just summarizes the whole paradox perfectly. It boils down to three key factors. First, let's talk about benefit. With gene therapy, the benefit is so direct, it's personal. It's about curing a disease. But with GM crops, the benefit often feels indirect, like it's helping a corporation more than the actual consumer. Second, the target. Gene therapy helps one sick person. GM crops, on the other hand, are seen as affecting everyone, the entire population, the whole ecosystem. And finally, and this is a big one, trust. We generally trust our doctors, our medical institutions, but there is a deep, deep-seated distrust of these large agribusiness corporations. So this analysis brings us to the final and I'd say most important section for you as an aspirant. What is the path forward? The author of the article, K. Vijayaraghavan, uses a very powerful metaphor of a chariot to describe this challenge. This quote just perfectly captures the tightrope a country like India has to walk. If you regulate too much, you stifle the very innovation we need to solve our biggest problems. But if you regulate too little, you risk consequences you can't even foresee. As a future administrator, your job will be to find that perfect balance. And believe me, this is the central challenge of governance in the 21st century.
So, the key takeaway here is not to be risk-averse, but to be risk-aware. The author argues for what he calls wise regulation, a framework that actively encourages innovation while also providing really strong oversight. Remember these keywords for your answers: a system that is rigorous, reasonable, and enabling.
And that leads us right to this, a potential mains or interview question. When you see a question like this, use the framework we've just discussed. Talk about the different public perceptions, that critical role of trust, and the need for a robust, independent regulatory body. A well-structured argument is exactly what the examiner is looking for. This is a complex issue, for sure, with no easy answers, but understanding these dynamics is the absolute first step. Keep thinking. All the very best.